Hello, how's it going?
Oh, it's going very good. How you doing?
Good, thanks. Just getting on here a little bit early just in case there's stuff that needs to be done.
Yeah, I'm just, I do have a PowerPoint. I'm looking for the share screen button, and
Sure.
doesn't appear that I have it.
That's weird that it's not on the okay, wait a
Oh,
second.
here it is.
Okay.
Yeah, now it popped up. I just didn't have my mouse hovered in the right area, I guess.
Oh.
I'm just gonna check this while it's just us cool kids in here, okay?
Sounds good.
You let me know if you can see it. Give me one moment.
Okay. Yep, I can see it.
All right, and it should be kind of a full screen look now.
It's not full screen yet. Um, I don't see the present button on there either. That would make it full screen.
It's full screen on my side. That's
You-
odd.
Do you see the slides to the side though? And kind of
No, I
oh,
don't.
yeah, it's weird. Because I can still see the Google slide
Really?
background.
Huh. So you're kind of seeing like the makeup of the like the building of the PowerPoint presentation.
Exactly.
Let me try it again here.
Huh.
You still see the makeup of it?
No, it's different now, but I still see like to the right side it says next slide and then notes underneath.
Huh.
So
Well,
it says
that I can kind of live with.
okay,
Let me uh, yeah, that I can live with. I
okay,
mean, it doesn't quite look as unprofessional.
right,
Just trying to see, there's some different buttons here I haven't seen. We use Teams mostly up here.
okay,
So I just want to white screen with show task, but I don't know. I can live with that. They can see what's coming up next. Not that big a deal.
okay. Yeah, it doesn't look bad.
Okay.
Uh,
And this thing, I'm gonna try it one more time. Make sure we're at least 2 out of 3 times.
right. And then do you know I know that I'll be spotlighting certain people when they're presenting. Do you know if that will be because I know the presenters it says Danita and you, and then Rebecca as the moderator.
You know, I'm not 100% sure.
Okay. I think it's all three of you. I was just making sure if you knew something else, but I know for sure you will be on there.
Yeah, how do are you, okay, you are screen sharing. Okay, there it is, across the top, sorry. All right, now it's going, right?
Yeah, it's gone now.
Okay.
Okay. And then
How many people are they expecting for this conference?
I'm not sure actually, because I know they have it broken down. I'm not sure for this exact session. I'll be very
They,
curious. Though.
they didn't sign up in advance or anything?
I think they did, but with the information that they gave me, I don't know the numbers. So
Okay.
they probably know. They just didn't tell me.
What the what?
Right. How are you feeling about the session coming up?
I'm fine. It's different than what I thought it was going to be. I thought it was going to be actually like jobs within the prison system for the persons in our care, not necessarily, like our staffing patterns and how to apply and things like that. So that I just learned Tuesday. So I changed up my presentation yesterday and this morning. So I'm hoping it is built on some interaction. So,
Okay.
I mean, I only got 20 slides and there's not a whole lot in there. So I'm hoping they have some questions or thoughts that can spark and generate some comments. I mean, I do kind of have the 5 questions were sent to me that the mediator will kind of lead us through. So we'll see.
Okay. That sounds good, and that's helpful to know too, because you're doing this first element alone as opposed to with Danita, the other person, right? Does she have?
No, I think this is a shared, unless she can only make the second one. I'm not sure. I wasn't told that. So
Yeah, I know. Okay.
my understanding is we're doing this together, to be honest with you. But
Okay. No, that's
I
what
don't
thought.
know. I don't know her.
Oh, okay, okay. Yeah, I was brought on last minute with kind of some of the tech and back
Sure.
back stuff too. But I did have an understanding that you guys were doing it together.
Yeah, we're doing it at the same time. I'll say that.
Okay.
But I said I don't know her. I don't work with her. I believe I've crossed paths with her in the past, but I'm not 100% sure.
Okay. That's interesting to be doing that, presenting together without that prior relationship.
Yeah, so I mean, she may have her own presentation, and we'll just do kind of a bifurcated setup of it, and then we can do questions at the end. So maybe if she pops on here in the next few minutes before everybody else, we can work that out. Now, do you have to let the people in, or do they just start coming in on when they click on the link on the deal?
I think they should just be coming in because I wasn't told that I had to let them in.
Okay.
If I need to, it'll be easy enough to do so. But
Yeah, and the only reason I ask is because if Ms. Fox does pop in, if they are in a waiting room to be let in, we would have 2-3 minutes just to kind of hash this out on
yeah, I think that
ourselves.
would be great to have that time
Yeah.
because this time is going by quick. I see it already about 10 minutes till it's
Yeah.
yeah, hopefully
Yeah.
it's early.
11:35, I think it's supposed to start.
Yeah, I'm hoping that her and Rebecca come. That'd be great. Hi, Sarah and Danita. How are you guys doing?
Hello, how are you?
Good. I'm glad you hopped on. Kevin and I were hoping that maybe you guys could get a chance just to go over how you guys want to do this together.
Sure. Hi, Kevin, how are you?
Good. How are you doing, Danita?
Not too bad. Donetta is the pronunciation.
Donetta. All right. Sounds
Yeah.
great. So I do have a very brief 20-slide PowerPoint related to the DOC hiring and staffing practices, which goes over some of the positions available, how to apply, and some of the vacancies and what some of the job details are. Most of those slides are literally just recruitment, pictures or slides. So I don't know if you have a PowerPoint or anything that you would like to present or speak on.
I do not have a PowerPoint. I was just going to be here to answer questions and my personal experience working in the DOC and what my experience is like being hired and that type of thing. So I can follow you after you do your presentation, I think would be the better way to
Okay.
go.
Absolutely. Yeah. I kind of speak on mine coming up through the ranks and some of the duties that entailed and what entailed to get through that. We'll go through some of that to give you an opportunity to speak, and then we'll just kind of open it up for questions if that works for you.
Sounds great.
All right.
So then I can spotlight you, Kevin, first. So then you'll just kind of be on full screen and have all your things showing, and then I'll have you go second. Donetta, right?
Correct. Yes.
Okay. Okay, and then I can spotlight you secondly then, and then have you answer your questions and share your piece.
Great. Thank
Okay.
you.
Yes, thank you all.
Kevin, are you still currently working for the DOC?
Yes, I am deputy warden at Jackson at the moment.
Oh, okay. I retired from Oak Hill in 2016 as a
Okay.
captain there.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I never worked Oak Hill. Been there a bunch, obviously, when I was at the training academy, bringing the tours through there back in the day. But yeah, I never worked there. I applied for a sergeant there in like '96, but they didn't take me.
I started out in Racine when I came out of the academy and did that for about 9 months, and then went to Milwaukee at Felmers Chaney, and then to the high rise, the security detention center.
Sure, absolutely.
And then ended up at Oak Hill for my last 10 years.
Okay. Yeah, for sure. We got some mood music.
I see. I'm interested to hear and see your slides. I'm sure a lot of things have changed since I was hired.
Just more vacancies, probably.
Well, I'm sure that's the case too.
Yeah. Like I said, there's not a lot. It's hopefully educate some on exactly what our roles are and what sometimes it's hard to present. You and I have lived this life where we know what prison is and the jobs it entails, so it's difficult.
Yeah, I keep saying there's a book in me that it's been sitting with me for a while, but I haven't gotten started on writing it just to talk about the experience and what that was like.
Yeah, absolutely.
We can wait just a few more minutes too. I know that the moderator, Rebecca Barber, is not here yet, as well as some of the other guests and stuff coming from the other sessions.
Yeah, they were just wrapping up. That's why I was a little bit late. I was just listening to the last remarks of Mr. Wesley.
Yes, we can give him a few extra minutes to come from that.
Good afternoon. How's everybody doing? Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you. Thank you for the music also. That was a great, powerful morning that we've had already so far. How are you feeling about it? Thumbs up. Good, good, good. So let's just jump right in. And if you wouldn't mind, each one of you, could you just tell a little bit more about yourself? Just give an introduction. I'll start. My name is Rebecca Barber and I'm with Nehemiah. I am on the reentry team and I am the housing coordinator for our Dignity Housing program. So I'm going to be facilitating and help moderating today. And if Ms. Fox and Kevin, please, whoever wants to go first, can you please tell me, Kevin, how do I pronounce your last name? I don't want to be on a first name basis. I just want to make sure I'm saying it correctly.
You're fine. First name basis is fine, but it's Kevin Garceau.
Garceau. Okay. Okay. So either one of you, whoever wants to jump in, if you wouldn't mind just saying a little bit about yourself and how you are involved with the Department of Corrections.
Sure. So Ms. Fox and I spoke briefly before we came into the conference, and we're kind of going to do this together, but slightly separate. My name, as has been mentioned, is Kevin Garceau. I'm currently the deputy warden at Jackson Correctional Institution, which is approximately 1,000-bed medium security institution in Black River Falls, Wisconsin, in Jackson County. I started with the state in 1995 and started as a line, working the line at the lower level, and continue to progress up through the ranks to where in the last 2020, spring of 2020, I promoted to the position of deputy warden. I do have a PowerPoint that will get into some of the positions within the prison, some of the recruitment tools. There will be some recruitment aspects of that, and I'm hoping that when we get through that, it's not overly long, and hopefully it paints a picture of what it's like, what the different positions are working in a prison. Because I think a lot of people just assume it's guards or correctional officers, and there really is a lot more to that makes this institution work and the state of Wisconsin work. So when that PowerPoint is completed, Ms. Fox and I are definitely open for any type of questions regarding our careers, where we got or how we got to where we did, things that may have helped in that, things we wish we didn't do, or may have slowed things down a little bit. But yeah, we're really hoping it turns into an interactive experience for everybody, and we can answer some questions and what it's like or what it all entails.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Vanetta Fox, and I also came up through the ranks. I retired, though, from Department of Corrections in 2016 as a supervisor. I was a captain, but I came up through the ranks. I believe I started in 1993. And so my conversations here will be just my experiences and what I've gone through going through the ranks, and lessons learned. And like Kevin said, things maybe I would have done differently and things of that nature. So just an open book. You can just ask me the questions after the presentation, and I'll share my experience with you. Nice to be here.
Wonderful. Thank you both. I appreciate it. So the first question I actually have is, everyone is familiar with corrections officers and wardens, but what other types of jobs are there within the prison system?
Absolutely. And if you would like me to start with the PowerPoint I've got, it kind of goes through some of that and shows some of those positions, and maybe it'll give a little bit of a broader outline of exactly where we're at. And at any time, if anybody's got specific questions related to the slide or slides, feel free to either raise your hand, or there's not that many. So, if you jump in, you certainly be okay too.
Absolutely. Sure.
So,
Go ahead.
all right, give me 1 minute. All right, so, as you guys are aware, what you clicked on is, the prison staffing and hiring process. And so, again, a little bit about myself. Started in 1995 with the state of Wisconsin. I actually started with the Department of Health and Social Services at the Wisconsin Resource Center. For those that may not know, the Wisconsin Resource Center is a facility that those with significant mental illnesses or issues that are incarcerated individuals, where they go to, where historically it's a little bit more or considerably more on the treatment aspect of the prison setting rather than the the other aspects related to prison. So that kind of started my career on understanding both the security and the non-uniform side of things, and how the programming and the aspects related to programming go hand in hand. And you can't have good security without good programming. You can't have good programming without good security. So I was fortunate enough to start there and see a different side of things. In 1998, I promoted to sergeant to Columbia Correctional Institution, which is a maximum security institution in Portage, Wisconsin. Unfortunately, it has the recognition or the history of it was the institution where Jeffrey Dahmer and Anderson were murdered. That was prior to I got there, but it seems to always come up in conversations. 2001, I again returned to DHS and was at the Sandbridge Secure Treatment Center. That is the institution that houses the Chapter 980 commitments. The Chapter 980 is a sexual violent person. So these are the persons that are convicted of serious sexual assaults, have done their prison time, but the state of Wisconsin has deemed them too dangerous to return to society without additional treatment. 2005, I promoted to captain at New Lisbon Correctional Institution in New Lisbon, Wisconsin. In 2012, I shifted gears a little bit and went to the training academy and was a lead instructor for all new staff coming into the Department of Corrections. Did that for a year, moved up to Jackson Correctional Institution in 13, and then in 2020 to the deputy warden. And the hierarchy of the institution we'll get to. You're going to have your warden, then your deputy warden, your security director, and then the captains and lieutenants, as far as the uniform staff, all fall under that side of the house. The deputy warden would oversee the security director as well as all the programming, education, housing unit supervisor, and kind of the non-security aspects. So through this, when I spoke to a few when we're setting this up, part of this I was going to be, how would people go about applying for jobs? What kind of jobs are there in prison? And, any type of application for any state of Wisconsin jobs, you can just go to the wisc.jobs. It will take you, you can search, and it doesn't have to be DOC jobs. It is any jobs within the department or within the state of Wisconsin can be located there. But obviously those that affect the DOC, as I mentioned, is not just the uniformed or the officer ranks. Yes, we have persons working in security, but we got people working in maintenance, psychology, healthcare, probation, parole, support services, schooling, social work, and much more. So I like to tell people prison really is its own city. We are a city, we run as its own city. We obviously have housing. We have a jail within our city. We have our restrictive housing unit where persons that are dangerous to themselves or others consistently defy significant rules or disruption. They may have to be separated from the general population. Of course, we have medical and dental services. We have psychological services and education services. Programming is different by institution, and some institutions are designated certain programming, but we'll have anger management, sex education, AODA type services, just any type of gamut that you can imagine to get persons in our care assistance to regain their lives, so they can, when they do leave prison, that they don't return to that statistic, that they can move forward, put their past behind them, give them the tools they need to succeed, and hopefully go on and be, the family members, the friends that they want to be, rather than maybe the cycle they were stuck in. Religious programming, we have our own recreation. We got outside recreation, indoor recreation, and we need staff that can run that. Rec leaders, that work on the programs, the leagues, they take care of the community service aspect. We have a lot of things within prison that gives men or women in our care the opportunity to give back to society. I can speak specifically for Jackson. It sounds kind of silly. We have what we call the Teddy Bear Project. We have hired men that their whole job, their entire job, and as a paid position, is to make teddy bears. And those go out to nursing homes. They go to children's hospitals. It started years ago where we were giving them to state troopers and law enforcement, and they would have them in the back of their car if they came across a child victim, whether it be a victim of a crime or an accident on the road. They would give the child the teddy bear, give them something to focus on, rather than the drama or the significant issues around them. But because we're our own city, we have to employ people in the maintenance. We have trained certified electricians and plumbers and construction and woodworkers and concrete. These are a lot of big buildings, and we need to ensure that they maintain safe and efficient. Probably if you ask any of the men in our care, the most important aspect is our food service. We have an entire production type kitchen, and that makes 3,000 plus meals a day. And amazingly, they source that out. They shop, and it's a significant expenditure. So their food service leaders are tasked with creating not only a menu that's approved through dietary needs, but that's cost effective. And of course, we have support services, secretaries and personnel assistants and program assistants that kind of make my job easier and keep this place afloat, really. So again, you know, if you think of it as a city, we have it. We have every aspect of it, and we are in need or across the state looking for people in almost every aspect. So it really comes down to we, even in the, you know, just in the Department of Corrections, we have a job for everybody. You know, if somebody has the skills, the ability, and the willingness, we have a position that they could fill. It does take that village. You know, one of the things we remind all our new staff, we remind them at the academy is persons are sentenced to prison as their punishment. They do not come here for punishment. And with that, we are charged with ensuring that they get their needs met, whether that be educational or programming or medical or dental or psychological services. You know, I can't speak for other states, and I've worked at quite a few prisons through the state. It is not what you see on TV. It is not, you know, how things work. Certainly that there's bad days. Certainly bad things can happen and do happen, unfortunately. But you know, Wisconsin may not be perfect, but we put a lot of our effort into showing respect and to, you know, building the men or the women in our care up so they are that better person when they leave, you know, when they leave prison for the community. So within the Department of Corrections, we have a few divisions. The Division of Adult Institutions is exactly what you'd expect. That's where we'd house all adults or any person that was sentenced as an adult. We have the Division of Juvenile Corrections. I think everybody knows of Lincoln Hills and, you know, the news that makes on a regular basis. Years ago, there were several more. Lincoln Hills and Copper Lake schools are both up in the northern part of Wisconsin. We have the Division of Community Corrections, and that's where our probation and parole agents and those that are, you know, assisting the men and women that are under supervision yet but not incarcerated. And the Division of Management Services is kind of the, you know, the behind the scenes crew that works with our technology, handles the money, that oversees and makes all of these other divisions work. So the Department of Corrections, we got 10,000 employees, 250 different job titles. So when I say there's really almost anything for everybody, there really is 250 different job titles. Of that 10,000, 5,000 are related to security functions, whether it be officer, sergeant, lieutenant, captain, anything related to the security ranks. 1,400 others are related to probation and parole, so they're working with the men and women after their release, but are still under supervision. So 3,600 remaining approximately for 240. So 6,400 are for 10 different job titles, but we have, you know, that's where you get into the plumbers and the electricians and the treatment and program services make up 3,600 of the other persons. Here is some of the, you know, just some of the slides, some of the things we are putting around Wisconsin, throughout Wisconsin. It was shocking for me to see during the Bucks games or the commercials, starting to see ads for the Department of Corrections were being posted. It's kind of amazing that we're reaching out, and we'll talk a little bit about this at the end and hopefully create some discussion. Is we're struggling for staff. We're struggling for staff in almost every aspect. When I say we, you know, as a department, not, you know, not necessarily Jackson in general or another institution in general, but as a department, we are significantly struggling for staff for a variety of reasons. Sorry. Here is the, you know, if one were to apply or looking to apply, realistically, they could just put Wisconsin jobs or Wisconsin government jobs in Google, and it's going to come up. If not, wisc.jobs is your avenue. And again, that opens up the portal for all Wisconsin jobs or state of Wisconsin jobs, and they are posted for a minimum of 7 days. So if you know of somebody that is interested in taking on a career with corrections, you know, have them check that regularly. Sadly, I know this might be a little bit hard to see, but I'll go through some of it. Here is our vacancies. For our security and safety, you know, you said you're almost 5,000 positions total that we are approved for, and we are over 1,000 staff short. So across the state, our security ranks are 20%. And I can say at some institutions, you're pushing 40 or 45% short. Now, we have a duty to the men and women in our care, as well as the community, to maintain the safety. And a lot of these staff are working a lot of hours because they don't have any options. We have to have a minimum number of staffing. But as you can see, our social worker ranks. Is anybody in here a social worker, social work field, or knows of anybody coming through the social work field? You know anybody that's coming out of school for a social worker and they want to work for corrections? That is an area we are desperately short throughout the state, and it really is an area that's important because they are so vital in the role of the men and women in our care. They're the ones that are working for their release planning. They are the ones that are yearly reviewing their program and their reclassification to work with, you know, make sure that they're in the correct programs, that the programs that they are in are moving forward and making them a better person, as well as, you know, as it's coming closer to their release, they're helping with their housing. They may be reaching out to Miss Barber for housing. They may be reaching out and looking for areas that, you know, that these guys can go and try to be successful. It is, you know, it's painfully sad to see, you know, how many men are leaving here that they do not have the family support. They don't have anywhere to go. They, you know, at times they may be living in a really cheap hotel and they leave here with, you know, I've released guys that have been in prison for 15 to 20 years and they release with $50 to their name. Guys that technically don't have any money because they release here owing money. So it's difficult, and that social worker is a vital role. Of course, we got, you know, this is just a list of some of the others. I mentioned education. You know, we're hiring teachers on a regular basis. We're adjusting our vocational programming based on the needs or what is needed on the streets. And right now, that really is the blue collar. You know, some of the things, you know, bricklaying and cement work, construction, where these guys can get out and there's not necessarily going to have the stigma of being previously incarcerated built to them or with them. I mean, obviously there's certain jobs that some men and women getting out that they just do not qualify for, nor would they be appropriate for. And that may be based on their past, but there is a lot, you know, that so we will work with that. If we have somebody that's in for internet crimes, we're not going to send them to school to be an IT programmer, an IT support. That doesn't make any sense because that's going to set them up for failure. We're going to try to offer up other vocational programs where they can succeed. And maybe that's a career change in their life, but I think we've all had to sit back and realize that something's not working in our own life and make a change. And sometimes the men and women have to do that as well. This is just what that WIS jobs page looks like. You know, it's, you know, of course, typical Wisconsin, you have to have a cow in the middle of it, I guess. But if you click on the, you know, the benefits, it kind of goes through what you can expect with different jobs, what the benefit package would be. Again, if you are looking or you know anybody looking, you click on that. Does anybody got any questions so far? If you raise your hand, I don't think I can see it when I screen share. So if somebody just points out that somebody's hand's raised, I'd appreciate that. So when you go to that site, how do you apply? You know, create an account, obviously your name and, you know, information and email address. You can search by title or keyword. You will absolutely need to upload a resume or answer the questions. And every application is evaluated for requirements by a panel of experts in the field. So some of the entry-level positions are continual recruitment. You know, correction officers are posted every day. You can apply to be a correction officer every day throughout the institutions, noting that they're short. I know Some of the institutions that are significantly short, such as Columbia or Waupun, they have walk-in interviews where literally if somebody shows up and wants an interview, they will have it advertised. We'll do interviews on a certain night and they can walk in and somebody will help them get registered on Wix Jobs, upload their resume and do whatever it takes to get somebody that wants an application or wants an interview the opportunity. As I mentioned, it's likely a job for everyone. This is a state agency and we will have to do background checks and fingerprinting. That does, just because someone is releasing or has released from prison or has a history, that doesn't mean they are excluded. As I mentioned, there is some positions that they would be statutorily ineligible for. You know, if, you know, to be a correction officer, you have to handle weapons and you have to carry weapons at times. So if you have something in your history that doesn't allow you to have such weapons, that's not a correct career path for you. That doesn't mean that they can't be hired in other areas. And I know they have been hired and I know they go on to do this fine things. Just some more of our current billboards that are going up and about throughout the country or throughout the state. Nursing is another area besides social work that is critically short. You can imagine, you know, we have that hospital within our city, and we have to provide nursing care. And what we are seeing, and Ms. Fox maybe will speak on that a little bit too, is the sentences have gotten longer. You know, judicially they have given lengths of sentences that we didn't see 20 years ago when I started in '95. So with that, the population is getting older. Second to that is the population is getting sicker. They have a longer history of, for lack of a better term, just not taking care of themselves, whether that be a poverty issue, whether that be a drug or alcohol related issue. They're coming in considerably sicker. So our need for nursing is significant. So, you know, starting pay for a nurse, whether you're right out of school, $33 an hour to, you know, up to $37 an hour. There is night shift differentials. There's, you know, some institutions are doing evening bonuses or, you know, an add-on if they're going to work weekends and holidays. So again, if you know anybody in the nursing field or coming up to the nursing field, I mean, it's a great field to be in regardless of where you're at, whether it's prison or the private sector. But I can tell you, we do need it. So there's 21 adult and juvenile institutions within the state. Those are secured, what you would consider a prison. 16 correctional centers. Those would be your minimum community placement. Those would, you know, in the past we call work release camps. A lot of those men and women that are at those facilities, they are working in the community. Typically, these are persons that are getting ready to release. They have shown good conduct. They've completed all their programming, and they have an opportunity to earn a little bit of money. You know, there's quite a few in the northern parts of the state, and you know they work. You know, they maintain the parks. Some of them do lumber services. Some of them do maintain a museum or a memorial that's in the area. They're just out in the community, and truthfully, the community really doesn't know it. They're not out there. They're not wearing black and white stripes. They are not out there working the chain gang. They are not out there with big signs on them that say prisoner, and that's for multiple reasons. It shows some dignity to the men and women that have earned that opportunity and get their opportunity to start saving some money, start being able to provide for their families, or when they get out there, not, you know, request or be a burden on families either needing housing or additional money. So it's a pretty vital opportunity for most of the men and women, and it's extremely sought after. And throughout the state, and this number kind of surprised me until I put it on the slide, is we have 170 probation and parole offices, you know, and they're scattered throughout the state. Most every county's got at least one. And, you know, because we have releases to every county of the state. Correction officer, It's, as I mentioned, the security was our highest vacancies. Our current starting wage is 1903. One of the added bonuses of that is the pay may not be overly high in comparison, and we recognize that. But if you start young enough, you get to retire at 51 years old, you know, and some of that is, you know, as a correction officer for many years, you're going to work weekends and holidays and evenings that, you know, some of these other positions don't. So I've always kind of said that's, you know, that little bonus might be worth it to some. Others might choose, you know, a different career path within corrections that don't have that early retirement because they wanted to work your standard, you know, 9 to 5 type hours Monday through Friday. Just another couple of placards that are out and about. Through the security ranks, you know, and as I moved up and as Ms. Fox shared, you know, we started as an officer. You get hired, you're going to go to a 7-week training academy. In that academy, we hope you learn the skills to start you out on your career. It's never going to be all encompassing. You know, I'm learning stuff every day after 26 years. There's no way we can train everybody, but we can get them on the roll, you know, start them down that road. There's an opportunity to promote to sergeant. The sergeant is the lead worker. Typically, that person will oversee the housing unit, have 2 or 3 officers working under them, and the officers go to them. Then we got the lieutenants and captains. They report to the security director. The security director reports to the deputy warden, as myself, and then I report to my warden.
I'm just going to jump in real quick here. So with this particular one with the current vacancies, I think what we'll do is send them to the website for that, if that's okay with you.
Yeah.
I have a few questions, and I know that there might be a few other questions from the participants, but if you wouldn't mind, if we can just go over to Ms. Fox for just a moment, and then that way we can come back and do some of these things. Is that okay with you too?
Absolutely. So I'm going to get out of screen sharing and give Ms. Fox an opportunity.
Perfect. I appreciate it. So same question, Ms. Fox, if you can just do a quick intro and let us know what your background is with the criminal justice system.
Like I said, Danetta Fox, I came into, where am I now? 1993, started off as an officer at Racine Correctional and worked my way up through the ranks. I retired, like I said, in 2016 as a captain from Oregon. And yeah, I've worked at medium, max, and minimum institutions. So I have experience with all 3. I've been work release coordinator, where I'm helping inmates find jobs in the community, as Kevin just described a little bit, before they get out of prison. I've been involved in classifications, just a little bit of everything. I've done it all. Kevin, I just wanted to ask, what is the age range now and the criteria for officers coming in? Has that changed?
18 is still a minimum, and I believe the max is 55. So.
Okay. So, but yeah, if anybody wants to ask me any questions on experiences, what I've learned, I worked in retail for 15 years before I even started in corrections. So I think I had a start on how to deal with difficult people, right? and de-escalating situations. I think I was being prepared for that while I was working in the Department of in retail. And once I had my son, I decided that I wanted something that was a little more stable. I didn't have to move around in retail. I was opening up new stores, and I was, you know, working just crazy hours, and I wanted to be home more and just have more of a set schedule. And so a friend of mine, her mom was working in corrections at the time, and I was telling her about wanting to make a career change, but didn't know what I wanted to do. And so I talked to her mom, and she was the one that kind of invited me to start in corrections. And I did it half-heartedly, not thinking that I would ever even make it through. So I just kind of went through the motions, and it's like, you know, we'll see what happens. The next thing I know, I was invited for an interview, and then after that, I was at the academy, and I kind of look back and I'm like, how did this happen? And so I went through the 7-week course, and like I said, started in Racine, and was an eye opener, definitely. It's not what you think it is. You have these preconceived notions, right, of when you're going in and what you're going to do and how you're going to respond, and you're going to go in and help all of these people, and that kind of stuff like that. But it was a good experience, but it was also a frustrating experience. It's an exhausting experience. There's good and bad, right? And so what it taught me was that there's a lot more people that make mistakes and could be in this position than the ones that we're seeing in prison already, right? And that everyone does deserve a second chance, and that we should be treating people as humans, and seeing that hurt people, correct? And so the biggest thing that I think that I've learned in corrections is that we can do better in is finding out that past of those people and what made them come to where they are now, right? And go back and try to fix some of that trauma, or even before that, starting some preventative things before they even get there, because you see it. You see the history as kids are growing in school and different things, and you know what's going on in their lives. And if we can start some early interventions, I think we can even derail probably half of the people that are incarcerated these days. And that's, I think, my biggest frustration and kind of, I don't know, negative view, if you will, that we can't get in earlier and start these interventions earlier to stop some of the incarcerations that we see and the recidivism, because they're not getting the help that they need.
Absolutely. And, one of the things that was mentioned earlier by Mr. Garceau was that the social work portion is very understaffed and that they need more. So my question for Ms. Fox is, having worked with gentlemen, especially at Oregon, where if the other participants on the Zoom today aren't familiar, Oregon is community corrections. So it's non-fenced, it's a work release center. It's something it's a little bit closer to just before someone would get released. So in that case, they are heavily relying on social work and connections and community reentry right at that point. But in your opinion, that's a small population, and not everybody releases from community corrections. So that social work is so important, even at a maximum facility level and a minimum facility level. So in your opinion, when you see the list that's being shared of where the vacancies are, would you put that on a high priority list as far as where should we do our hiring? Do you think that that's up there as far as preventing some of the recidivism?
I'd have to say it's a little more complicated than that. First, I just want to add a little bit to what you said. So in Oregon, there's 2 facilities, right? There is that minimum facility that's right before you get out, but behind that is the minimum facility behind the fence, which is where I worked, but I also collaborated with the community center. And so we fed a lot of those inmates to that facility, but having that social worker right when you walk in the door, because they need to start right from the beginning. What are your needs? What are you missing? What treatments do you need? Is it schooling? Is it mental health? And so starting that track right off the bat and getting to know that offender when they first walk in the door is critical, right? Because if you see somebody a year or 2 down the road and that's the first time they've seen a social worker, there's valuable time that's been missed already, right? And things that are going on. So yes, it's important, but I won't say it's top priority, because obviously the officers are important too, because obviously we have to keep the facility safe, the inmates and other staff safe. And so that's also a priority. But programming is definitely up there. And it needs to be addressed, and there needs, and as you can see, the vacancies, even if you have all of those vacancies filled, it's the reality is there's still not enough people to go around to give everybody the attention in the individualized programs that they may need, right? It's like Wesley said earlier, it's like drinking from a water hose. There's just not enough staff to accommodate the inmates, because obviously some need more attention and more services than others, correct? Some may not be ready when they first get in, and you kind of have to work with that. And then those getting out, it's a little bit more urgent need, so you have to give them the priority. So it's just staffing is really important, like Kevin said.
Right.
It's across the board. It's across the board.
Thank you. I appreciate
If
that.
I could just add on that, it's, I started in 95 and things have really changed, truthfully, through the early 90s, mid 90s, late 90s. It was a lock 'em up, throw away the key type situation. And we were learning, and it took a long time, and it was a painful lesson, that we were sending people out worse than they came in. There's no doubt that, this doesn't bode well for my profession, that there is some men that learn to be better criminals in prison than they were outside. So the department has taken a lot of look on what made that. We speak on the trauma-informed care. What made this person go that path? What made them to make these choices? Really, that's what it comes down to, is ultimately they made choices. They can say, people say, I made a mistake. Well, they made a choice to do this or that. And for whatever reason, their background, their pressure, their peers had them take this choice. So we've been really focusing on that and getting to that root cause of what makes them use, what makes them hurt others, what makes them feel that they don't place the value of life or value of property of others over themselves. And then with that, the last handful of years as well, is we're really focusing individually on that person. What does this person need, and to what level do they need? Through that trauma-informed care and the Compass Coalition, we learned that if you put somebody that just needs for lack of a better term, a light tune-up, their car is only running a little bit bad, we don't need to overhaul everything, because by surrounding them with those people that do need that everything, we are hurting their progression. So really focusing on what exactly does Mr. Garceau need and to what level. Let's not give him too much, because now I can focus more on the other person that needs 120 hours of this program, rather than Garceau might only need 40, and get that person a skill they need, but allowing us to focus on, those that need it much more intensely. It used to be person came into prison and they were assigned, AODA, anger management, domestic violence, and it was a big rush to get it done. And, over time we realized, well, that didn't work either, because if we give everybody the AODA skills on their first month they're in prison and they got a 6-year sentence, everything changes. We make prison easy to stay mostly sober. By the security aspects, we keep them clean. Of course, there's always ways that they're going to get drugs or alcohol in, sadly, but we're also learning that through time, we give them their skills closer to their release. The skills are more relevant and they're more fresh when that person releases. So in the 27 years that I've been in, we have had a significant change. It really has shifted from the lock them up, throw away the key warehousing situation that it might have been at one time. But we have to change also, because the men and women coming in are significantly different than they were 25 years ago, 50 years ago. For lack of a better term, they're coming in harder. They are coming in prepared for prison. Our restrictive housing, which is our jail within the prison, people didn't used to want to go there. Now they are accepting of going there. So that is not the deterrent it used to be. So we have to get to the root of that.
You're talking about the segregation, correct?
Correct. Why are those persons so willing? What changed in their makeup and their upbringing where they are not, I don't want to say scared of it, but it is not the deterrent it used to be. It's a badge of honor to act up and go there to some men. I can speak specifically on the men. So that is where that role, that social worker and treatment specialist, getting them at the door, as Ms. Fox says, and really getting them the programming they need, and really, digging deep to see what caused it. Let's address the trauma that happened years ago, if, you know, that made them take
So-
that path.
I have a question for you regarding that then as
Yes.
well. So, you know, many a times there's many times when individuals come into the system because of a choice that they made years ago, or maybe fresh. And there may be, you know, looking at that and the root cause and what got them there. How do you, I guess, how do you provide ongoing training, or how do you handle that within your staff to address the fact that, you know, a lot of segregation is being given out, probably a little bit more than necessary, that's my opinion. But what happens with that is it leads to new traumas that they didn't have before they came in. So in understanding that there may be a focus of, you know, when they were free before they came here, what kinds of things are you doing for your staff that is very much understaffed and going through stress with this population that's actually over capacity for the facilities? And how does that balance out? Because I feel like, I mean, there is a lot of responsibility on the person in your care's case, but how do you, with your staff, address that? A lot of that is also staff contribution to their success.
You know, and I'm sure Ms. Fox can speak on this as well. You know, a lot of it comes down to the quality of the staff we hire and what role are they going to take, and what role do we hope they take. But to that point, you know, everything changes, right? Where they're, you know, the administration changes well above me, and then they have this philosophy, and we're going to go down this road, and studies show that trauma-informed care. It really comes down to education. You know, we educate all of our staff. We educate all of our staff on person first language, you know, that we don't call them inmates, you know, anymore. We call them persons in our care. We direct them by their name rather than, hey, inmate. And I ain't gonna lie, we used to. And when I started, that's what it was. It was inmate so-and-so, get over here. Now we're trying to change that culture that fosters that respect, and hopefully it comes back in return, and it makes it more, I don't want to say inviting, because we don't need prison to be inviting, but the men and women in our care need to understand that they can receive the help, that they are more than a number, and that they go through that. So it really comes down to that education. Sadly, when you are so short, sometimes it's a survival for everybody. You know, there is only so much we can do, and then we ask a lot of those few staff, and sadly we burn them out. And we need to make sure that we look out for their well-being as well. Go ahead, Dana.
Yes, all of that is absolutely true. And I just kind of wanted to comment on a couple of things. Again, back when I was working and early on, all programs too were kind of cookie cutter for all residents coming in, right? It's like, you need this, this, and this, and you're going to do it regardless whether you need, this is what we think you need, so this is where you're heading. I think that has changed over time too. Like I said, I've been gone for 5 years, so I'm sure there's a lot more change. But the other thing that I think we as a department could do better at is, like you said, not only acquiring enough staff, but training those staff, and not just the social workers, right? It needs to be the officers. It needs to be the administrators. We have, at least I was seeing in my last couple of years in corrections, like you said, 18 and coming in a door right out of high school. You don't even have life experience, let alone the experience that these men and women have experienced to be able to even help them through that trauma. You don't even know what informed trauma is as an 18-year-old to be able to assist somebody. So learning how to de-escalate or ask those motivational, you know, interviewing skills, to have those to be able to get at the root of what is he trying to say, or what is she trying to say, or what's really going on, instead of just reacting. So I think, in my opinion, I've always wanted to have more training with staff, cultural competency, right? Trauma-informed training, de-escalation skills and things of that nature needs to be more emphasis on that. Restorative justice, I have gotten into that. I had my first training probably 5 years into working in Department of Corrections. I discovered restorative justice. I went to a training and it was enlightening for me. It was something that I've always believed in and practiced, but I didn't know what it was, and I didn't have language for it. It was just a belief value that I had. This is the way you treat people, right? And when I went to this and found out, I'm like, that's what I was trying to relay and trying to say, this is who I am and how I operate. And why aren't we using this more in Department of Corrections? I never got an opportunity to really use it on a bigger scale individually with people I interacted with, whether it was the offenders or my staff, I used it in the way that I could. But I think that is a huge, huge way that I think we can make some good strides is really practicing more of the restorative piece, allowing the residents to have more of an input and say on what their incarceration looks like, programming wise, what they need, what their goals are, instead of being told this is what you're going to do. Let's work at how do we do this together and what's going to make sense for you getting out there, because we're all not going back to the same thing, right? They're not going to have the same experiences we have coming back out. And so we have to be more individualized that way, but also seeing that, yes, you made a mistake, you've done some things in your past, but how can we correct that and how can we support you getting there now should be the focus. And a lot of times, and like Kevin said in the past, that's not what our focus was. It's like, you did something bad, we're going to punish you. This is what you got, this is what you do, so you just deal with it. And now you go out there and behave and become a productive citizen. That didn't make any sense, because like you said, we were turning out people worse than what they came in. They were more angry, they were better criminals. And so changing that mindset that we know there's some good nuggets in there, how do we get to that? And how do we help you see that and connect back with community again? To stay connected, actually, not even disconnect and then reconnect. You have to stay connected even while you're in.
Right.
So that's an important piece.
Thank you. Yes. And one of the slides had showed that you do actually have some of the people that are incarcerated doing some jobs and working within the facility. So how do you best train your staff? And this can be a quick question so we can get to some of the other panel people on the discussion. But how do you train your staff then to handle that? So say that you have a staff member that's working in the kitchen, maybe it is someone that is actually DOC, or maybe it is that you've pulled someone in that was an officer or somebody that just got hired. How do you work with them to best train them when they're working right alongside someone who is actually considered incarcerated? Because then you also have the wage difference. You have starting at $16 an hour, or 18 or 20, whatever that case may be, if say you're in the kitchen, but then they're working next to someone doing the same job for 12 cents an hour, which is a $10 paycheck after 2 weeks. So how do you work with the people that you're hiring and you're coming in to be able to understand and work well in that scenario?
I think the biggest thing is anybody hired or anybody that I hired, and the things we really promote and push forward is every staff member is a role model. You know, they are leaders and they are teachers as well as their assigned job title. You know, our staff that work in the kitchen alongside, it's more of a teaching and mentoring role, assisting the persons in our care with developing those skills. And that's a tough job. We're hiring people directly off the street and putting them in the kitchen with knives and sharp instruments, and, you know, and around persons that historically have done bad things or made really bad choices. But it really comes down to that role model. You know, that they're teaching a new lesson, they're teaching a life lesson, they're teaching a skill more than they're, you know, working beside them or bossing them around. I said, you know, we don't have the chain gangs, we don't have, you know, like Cool Hand Luke, the guy sitting on the horse with them, you know, cleaning up the roadways, because that's not effective anymore. We learned that 40, 50 years ago. So that mentorship and that role model, and that's our expectation, and with their respect, you know, that they can work next to them, you know.
So now, can I ask a question too? With the pandemic and everything that's been changing, as far as the numbers that are going down of how many you have on staff and people feeling more frustrated, employees, not just those incarcerated, but employees feeling more frustrated, and you know, obviously those incarcerated are frustrated. Everybody's kind of going through a very hard time right now. Numbers are really high on one end and really low on the other, so there's a clash. What have you seen an increase in kind of like a touch base or checking in on those that you have hired right now, in actual employees? You know, there's, even when employees get frustrated, you know, they hand out more tickets or they try to use SEG, and then now you're saying, well, why doesn't it work? Well, they're using it a lot. I mean, somebody maybe had an extra slice of butter in their room, they get a ticket, they get a ticket, but it's not always because of a rule break. Sometimes the employees are just having a bad time. And so it's like the Oprah, like you get a ticket, you get a ticket, tickets for everyone, you get a ticket. So have you noticed any change in that as far as pulling people aside and saying, hey, I need to look at your mental health now. You know, I'm putting a lot of hours on you, expectations, and it's starting to reflect onto those in our care. How are you? And what do you see happen in that moment?
Sure, go ahead, Danetta.
I was going to say, yes, that does happen. And at least it did. Again, I can't speak for current day, but back in my time. And that's why I say, I think making sure that we're hiring the right people for the positions is very important. Whether they do, I always thought too that just like cops do psychological tests, I think we should do that for our officers and people who are going to be dealing directly with these people coming in, because they have so many issues and traumas and mental health issues that we need to know how to deal with just the basics, right? And if you have, like I said, an 18, 19, 20-year-old who's never even experienced that kind of environment or experience that kind of life, there's no way they can comprehend and understand that and be able to handle a situation when it gets, like you said, when they're upset or when the inmate's upset or whatever is going on. They have to be able to kind of know where to take that. And without that experience or training, it's difficult, and it can make the situation worse. And so that training, and I think it should be ongoing. That's just something that I've always noticed and wished for. And like I said, it may be changing now that I've been gone, but I think should be a priority.
Absolutely.
I also think that falls on me as the leader of the institution and the leaders that I hire and, that I supervise, that can look at their staff and say, whoa, they are burnt. They are fried right now. Let's get them out of that situation. Let's reach out to them, and sadly, when I say out of that situation, there's institutions that don't have that ability. They do not have enough staff to keep the doors open, basically, and that's not my fault. We didn't sentence them here. We have this amount. We have to be able to recognize the burnout in our staff. We have to be able to recognize that they may be going through some things and they are not acting as they do under normal circumstances. They are not presenting themselves as they do as normal circumstances. So there is training and there is expectations for the leaders of the institutions to recognize that and intervene. And it's hard, it's difficult at times, because truth be told, we could be under that exact same stress.
And we also have to recognize bad staff, period, right? Not that they're just having a bad day, but you're not fit for this position or for this particular area, whatever it may be. And I think in the past that was hard too, one, for short staffing. But when you had, the union was really strong, right? It was hard to kind of guide, discipline, correct staff that you felt weren't in the right place, right? And so, and I'm hoping that has changed as well. But those are just things that I think if we want to really turn out a better person, those are things that we have to look at, because it does inflict more trauma, right? It does increase the mistrust and the disconnect. And those are things that I think that are primary and that are important, that we have to have the right people in those positions and knowing how to respond in the right way when it's needed.
Absolutely.
And that is really something that is absolutely true. We have to recognize that those that are causing more harm than good, and it doesn't necessarily have to be physical, right? It could just be not being that role model, that mentor, and providing the appropriate positive stimulus. It doesn't do any good for me to have my staff bringing in drugs. It doesn't help the inmate. It creates a safety issue for everybody else. And unfortunately, that's a reality that we've all seen. We're trying to keep this institution clean. We're trying to break that cycle or that habit, and we have to discipline or hold people accountable. And it's not always, the purpose of discipline for staff, the same as it is for persons in our care, is to change behavior. Maybe that's a minor issue, like, hey, you really reacted wrongly to that. And with that, some part of that discipline is assigning them additional training. They may have to go to like a people skills training. They may have to do this, and in pay status, we need you to be better. And we also recognize that sometimes we have bad days, but sometimes that's not an excuse, though.
Right.
We may take that into consideration, but we're not allowed to have bad days, really. We're not allowed to abuse our power. And whether it doesn't even have to be physically, related to the Connor reports, that's why there's a checks and balances in there. A third party hears that Connor report and is supposed to weigh in. And I think that's an area that's really gotten better over the years. And in the last 5 or 6 years, at one point, it could have been considered kangaroo court. If it was written on the ticket, it happened. Now with more surveillance, more cameras throughout the institution, that can prove innocence as well as it can prove guilt. And our change in philosophy regarding restrictive housing to that is, it is different. When I was a hearing officer, I'm not proud. I used to hand out 360 days regularly. If you got in a fight, it was 240. If you injured staff, it was 360 automatic. And now it's getting to be our direction from our current administration. It's 60 days max. If they get in a fight, it's 60. So you're looking at, 240 days in RH, restrictive housing versus 60. And with that, the release process is, we don't want anybody to release from restrictive housing. We don't want them to release from a max institution. The goal is to get them through the progression and get to an Oak Hill or an Oregon or a minimum center where they can get more life skills, where they can get more independence, where they can make some money, where they can start supporting their child, children, friend, or family, and not necessarily need others as much. They're not needing somebody. I don't need to put a burden on my family who's already struggling to send me $50 so I can make phone calls or buy canteen, But again, a lot of that comes to the choices as well. I know grown men that have been incarcerated for 15 to 20 years that can't get out of their own cycle to act appropriately to get to the mediums, and they are leaving from a max institution with no skills, whether it be work skills or program skills, because they have continued to be defiant, disruptive. There's a lack of trust. They don't want to put their trust in others. They grew up in a different culture than I did personally. I didn't grow up in the Northwoods, but I grew up in Green Bay and Oshkosh. It's a little bit bigger city, but that's not the same, and it's certainly not the same for the people that we hire in Jackson.
If
I
I can
think,
just piggyback off of that,
Sure, go ahead.
that is exactly right. It's culturally, right? The prison, when you look at the population versus staff, right? So there's a color difference. We know that the ratios are different. And so again, if I'm a 40-year-old inmate that has been in for 15 years, right? And I have a young 18, 19-year-old from New Lisbon coming down to supervise me now and tell me what I need to be doing, that is, it's like oil and vinegar. They don't know one another. They can't, you know what I'm saying? So if you get past just the professional level, right? And saying these are the rules you have to follow. But if you're going to be a role model, and if you're going to try to help that person become a better person, there has to be a connection. There has to be some kind of rapport. And that is hard to develop that when you don't have that cultural competence or the life experience to be able to relate to someone, to say, I understand where you're coming from, or what you've been through, and be able to start even a conversation on that level. So
Definitely.
that's
Definitely.
another important piece, right?
Yeah,
That's extremely
absolutely.
important. I think you need to have that because ultimately it's still bouncing back and forth, respect from one end to the next. And then, I like that you had mentioned that a number of days, say for getting in a fight or getting a ticket or whatever it is, has substantially gone down. I just want to remind everyone, the United Nations says that 11 days in segregation is considered torture. So even if we're still handing out 30 and 60 days in seg, that's still considered torture. So I feel like, in my personal opinion, there's got to be a better way. However, that's why I was asking, what types of things are the staff and the employees at the DOC receiving, so that they don't get to the point where they are so stressed out that that's just what they're giving, because it kind of works both ways. Some people might need to sit down for a little longer, but no one needs to sit down for 90 days. But we only have a few more minutes here. Is there anyone that wants to chime in or throw a question in the chat, or is anyone wants to unmute and throw something out for a final thought? I know we have several cameras off, so I don't know if you're shaking your head or you're But anyone want to step in? Go ahead. Paula, I know you had a question on what things had changed over time. Did you get that answered then?
I'm sure there's way more you can share. I appreciated hearing a little bit about restorative practices. At the same time, like a person can learn about it. How does something like that get, if there's passion for it in this within the employees, how do they get access to being able to create programming or to make some things happen so that that passion maintains its fire? Does that make
And
sense?
that's a great question. And that's some of the things that have changed over the last handful of years. When Donette and I would have started, social workers and treatment specialists are the only ones that do X, Y, or Z, the only ones that do programming of this. We really adjusted that over time. And recently, if you're a correction officer, a sergeant, or in food service, and you want to be involved in the programming, we allow that because that gives a nice broad background for that person. It helps them understand, and it also allows the persons in our care to see that person a little bit differently too. It gives them a different level of that role model. But to make that change, realistically, Paula, it's state government, and it's a big ship to turn sometimes, and it takes time, and it takes, you get 350 employees here, and it's going to take buy-in from everybody to make that cultural or change related to programming or anything else. But we do a lot of programming here. We have 16 8-week-old puppies running around our institution that the men in our care take care of, and they raise them for disabilities. They start training them for disabilities, and they work with that, and bringing new programs in. Any staff member can bring forward a program. Obviously, there's a vetting process to go through that, and some of them need to be checked out, and some of the programs are handed down from us saying, hey, this is the direction we're going to go. Typically, you put something out, who's interested in doing this, and sometimes it's a workload issue. Can't do this right now. We don't have enough staff. We can't do that. But we are always open, and the DOC is always open for new avenues, such as different programming. It makes our job easier, truthfully. If these new persons that are coming in, if we were to react to them the way we did in the 90s, it would be a completely different aspect as far as dangerousness for everybody. They are not responding the same as they did in the 90s. I'll say that.
Absolutely. Hey, I just want to say thank you to everyone who attended this session. Thank you, Ms. Fox, and thank you, Mr. Gerso. If you have more questions, you can definitely reach out to each one of these individuals. I think now we're going to take about maybe 8-minute break before your next session. So feel free to log back into the main link and click where you'd like to go next. And again, thank you so much for all of your honesty and joining in. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you for
Thank
your
you all.
work.
Nice to meet you all. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good one.
Thanks, Rebecca.
Thank you.
You guys did a great job.
Thank you. It went a little faster than I expected.
Yeah. That was really quick.
I'm not complaining about it. I was going to say I was getting a little nervous with that music you picked. I felt like I was in the dentist chair. You want to talk about trauma? You want to talk about trauma-informed care? I was getting anxious just listening to it.
And Kevin, I don't want you to think that I'm being too negative there with my interpretation and experience, but I think people need to see both sides and kind of where we were and where we're trying to go and how we are evolving. But the reality of it is what it is, right? And so we have to acknowledge that piece too and say we know it's this, but we're trying to get to here,
And me as well too. Just know that, I hear a lot of the responses from the people in your care, but not from an angry place. So the responses you may hear on a day-to-day basis of, well, he said this, he did this, whatever, is coming from anger. And in my case, when I'm hearing about what they're going through, it might be from a different place. So I'm just trying to share that as well. So we all kind of have a good roundabout way of what it looks like, not just from your point of view, but from your staff's point of view. And then also, most importantly as well, is those people that are in the corrections and have to be coming home. So no disrespect at all. I'm going to just mute and turn off the camera for a second. You guys feel free to take another, 5-6 minutes to just breathe in, breathe out before we hit the next one. And then we'll just go from there.
Will do. Thanks.
Thank you. I think we can go ahead and get started. Thank you for the music in the background. I love that. So for those of you who just joined us, I do have a dog jumping up next to me, so I apologize for that. For those of you who just joined us, I am Rebecca Barber and I'm with Nehemiah. So I'm on the reentry team and I'm the housing coordinator for our Dignity Housing Program. And we'll get started by letting Ms. Fox and Mr. Garceau just introduce themselves and let us know what their affiliation is and what kind of experience they have with the criminal justice system.
Good afternoon. My name is Danetta Fox, and I am a retiree of the Department of Corrections. I retired back in 2016. I worked for the department for 25 years. Started off as a correctional officer and worked my way up through the ranks to captain. Previously to that, I was employed in the retail field for about 15 years. And so now I'm working with the county restorative justice under the umbrella of the Department of Human Services. So I work for a community restorative court. And so that's my, for now. Thank you. Nice to meet you all.
Welcome, welcome. And Mr. Garceau, you also have a PowerPoint you'd like to use. So if you want to just give your introduction and then you can take it away with some of the facts that you have.
Well, welcome everybody. I'm glad you all could make it. My name is Kevin Garceau. I'm the current deputy warden at Jackson Correctional Institution in Black River Falls, Wisconsin. It is a 1,000 bed medium facility. We're here today to talk about prison staffing and the hiring practices. So I do have a short presentation. I will share my screen real briefly. At any time, if anybody's got any questions, feel free to either just jump in or raise your hand. If those watching can let me know, once I share my screen, I kind of lose sight of that. So if you can help me out, I will share my screen and we'll get started. All right. Does everybody see this correctly? Does it look like a PowerPoint or does it look like I'm just building it still? All right.
You're like right in the middle of your PowerPoint. Go back to the beginning. You're at,
Interesting.
there you go.
I am seeing the first slide, but let me
There you go.
restart this.
Now we can see the first slide.
All right, where it says Department of Corrections Staffing and Hiring.
Correct.
All right, very good. So as mentioned, my name's Kevin Garceau, and I, started in corrections in 1995. And unfortunately for me, I am not retired yet. I'm slightly jealous of Miss Fox. She said that twice, and I've been jealous and more jealous each time she said that. So I have about 8 more years to go, and that is the either the bonus or the crux to bear for starting at 21 years old and right out of school. So I started at Wisconsin Resource Center, which is technically not with the Department of Corrections. With at the time, it's gone through several names, but it was housing inmates, persons in our care that had significant mental and emotional issues that could not make it in the proper prison setting and needed additional care. So it was much more focused on the programming and treatment, those with significant psychological needs, and worked with them on that. It gave me a perspective different than my counterparts that went right into prison, because it allowed me to see the nature of both programming and security working together, and realizing early that good security makes for good programming, and programming makes everybody's job in security easier as well. So a few years after that, I did promote to sergeant at the Columbia Correctional Institution. That is in Portage, Wisconsin. That is a maximum security institution. At the time was the newest maximum security institution. And then in 2001, I promoted back to DHS at Sandbridge Secure Treatment Center. And for those that don't know, that is not a prison. However, that is the institution that houses the Chapter 980 commitments, or those that have been legally deemed sexually violent persons. So they have already completed their prison sentence, but through lack of programming or their reluctance of programming, the state has deemed them too dangerous to return to society. 2005, I moved up the road to New Lisbon Correctional Institution. In 2012, I took a little bit of a break from being inside the prison and went to the DOC Training Academy. All new officers that start are required to attend a 7-week training academy. And we'll talk about that a little bit when we get a few more slides in, but I was one of the lead instructors of that. And it, it was a great time in my life. I was, looking at almost 20 years inside the prison system. And it was a nice, gave me an opportunity to reset. I got to see fresh young faces coming in that were ready to, make a difference. And it worked out really well for me. The following year, I promoted to security director, and a handful of years later than that, I promoted to my current role as deputy warden here. So what a lot of people don't realize or don't necessarily understand is the impact of so many more positions within the prison than just your officers and sergeants. Just a lot of people assume that, the prison is ran or made up by everybody in a uniform, but reality is that is a huge aspect of our jobs, but it takes every type of role to make a prison work and run. And these are just some of the positions. We obviously security, but we got a lot of buildings, and the buildings need maintenance, and we got those with psychological needs, and we need people that can work in that field, as well as healthcare, social worker, education, and teachers and support. So what I like to tell everybody is prison really is, when I speak of prison, I'm not speaking of the minimum centers or the work release. I'm thinking of the prison that you would expect. We really are our own city. We have our housing unit, which is our, apartment complexes. We have a restrictive housing unit, which is kind of our jail within our city for those that are dangerous to others or continually disruptive and need to be away from the general population. We can give them a timeout. We have our own hospital, our own dental. We have our own psychological services. Every institution's got a school. One of the things we learned years ago was, one of the basic needs to ensure that these persons don't come back into our care is getting them an education. That is one of the biggest hurdles, is allowing them to finish their schooling. Of course, every institution is going to have some level of programming. Some institutions got quite a few programs. Some have a little bit less. And that programming is determined based on what the inmates' needs are and to what level that programming need is. Some may not need a whole lot of programming. Some might have just had issues that needs to be addressed, that they held a job, they were productive in society, except for, maybe a drug-related issue that they were removed from society. So we're just going to address that. Others might be coming in without a whole lot of life skills, and that will be addressed. Do they need to finish their schooling? Do they need a career? Do they need to learn jobs? Do they need to learn, what it's like to report to work every day, and, the expectations of a boss? And so we go through all that, and it's really individualized, much more. And we spoke on this earlier. It's much more individualized than it used to be. It really used to be a cookie cutter program. But through the last probably 5 to 10 years, we're really trying to adjust that, and it's a constant evaluation of change. We have, religious services within the institution, and there's not one religion that's not represented within the institution. If we have a person in our care that has, that is a particular religion, we will get them the services. And if we don't have somebody that can provide that directly, we'll bring volunteers in, and or we'll do remote learning for them. So we got people that, we got chaplains, or we got persons that run our religious department. We got recreation within the institution. And as I mentioned earlier, we need people to keep this place, the lights on and the plumbing flowing, and, things need to be fixed from time to time. Probably the most important one is our food service. I can speak on Jackson. We make 3,000 plus meals a day. Those meals have to meet a particular nutritional standard. They have to meet a particular caloric breakdown. And, we got the persons that do that. And then, of course, we got the support services that make all of our jobs a lot easier. Our personnel assistants, our secretaries, such as that. when it comes down to it, they're really, if somebody's looking for a job and they want to work in prison, there is a career out there. There is a job for you. When I say it's, it takes a village, that we really are a city within a city, I remind all of our staff, and we remind everybody when they come in, persons are sentenced here as their punishment. They don't come here for punishment. That's, a key. It's not, Wisconsin prison system, fortunately, is not what you'd expect. It's not what you see on the TVs. Is it perfect? No. Is there room for growth and improvement? Absolutely. Is everybody going to agree with everything we do? Never going to happen. But, when we make these changes, when we make the programming changes, when we make those, cultural changes, sometimes they work, sometimes they don't, but it's made with at least the best interest of all involved, or what we thought. So the Department of Corrections is a large employer, 10,000 employees. And that's broken up into a handful of different divisions. The Division of Adult Institutions is where I work. That is the prison system for adults. The Division of Juvenile Corrections, you got their Lincoln Hills and Copper Lake schools. Years ago, we had Ethan Allen down in Wales. We don't have that anymore. And the Division of Community Corrections, that is your probation and parole personnel that oversee the men and women that are still under some type of supervision. And then the Division of Management Services, we don't hear much about them, and a lot of people don't know anything about them, but they're the ones that are working behind the scenes to keep all of the above three running. They're your BTM, they are your like internet technologies, your technology people, your money people, your, hiring people. They support us. So without them, we couldn't make anything work. So everybody in corrections is going to fall into those 4 areas. So as I mentioned, 10,000 employees roughly. And I mentioned earlier that there really is a job for everybody. Out of those 10,000 employees, there's approximately 250 different job titles that somebody could apply for. Security and security related functions are by far the biggest. They make up half of that, 5,000 employees just related to security alone. And then another 1,400 persons related to probation and parole functions. So on the custody side, whether it be internally or if they are still under supervision, of those 10,000, 6,400 are designated for the security side of things. So that means approximately 3,600 remaining fill all but 10 of those 250 positions. So 240 different positions make up 3,600 other staff. Just, these are some of the things that have been posted lately. Some might have seen these similar placards or displays during the Bucks triumphant whooping through the process and becoming world champions. That was interesting for me to see. We had never branched out that far for our recruitment, but as we talk more, we're going to see we are very short and we are in dire need. And sadly, at times, that shortage affects the outcome of the persons in our care, and because we can only do so much with so few people. If anybody's looking for a job in any type of state job, you can go to this link and I'll share it in the chat. And that will not be just corrections, that will be all state government jobs, and all jobs there are posted for a minimum of 7 days. So if you or a friend or family is looking for a government, state of Wisconsin job, have them check almost weekly. Certain jobs never come out that is continual recruitment, and that definitely is like a correction officer, social workers are continued recruitment, a handful of other ones where we're seeing the current recurring need that they will be posted regularly. But as I mentioned, the shortages. It might be a little bit hard to see, but our security line, 4,890 positions are allocated for those. We are short 1,019, and this was as of last week. So,
I don't want to interrupt you, but I just want to let you know that I have a slight tech issue where the slides don't seem to be changing. So
Okay.
We're not actually going to be able to see visually for right now until that changes. So if you want to just share some of the information and go through
Sure.
it. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you for bringing that up. So out of the almost 5,000 security positions, the state is short over 1,000. There, 1,000 of those are vacant right now. And so you're looking at approximately 20% shortage. And that's across the board. There are some institutions that are looking at 40 or 45% uniform staff or security staff shortages. The next highest one is social services, which our social workers and treatment specialists fall into. Almost 2,000 allocated positions across the state for that, and we have 220 vacancies, so a little bit more than 10%. We are always in need of good social workers, whether they're coming out of school or they're experienced. So if any of you on here are looking for a job in the social work field or treatment specialist field or know somebody, it is a career you can get in and last a lifetime if you choose.
Mr. Garceau, could you stop your screen sharing and then just restart it from where you are right now? It might just reset it.
Yep, for sure. Let me try
Wonderful.
that.
I see that one. So we'll see if it switches. Does everybody else see a new slide?
I can
Is
see
it
it
the-
now, yes.
Is it the one listing the positions and the vacancies?
Yes,
Okay. Very good, thank you.
thank
So
you.
as you can see, there's vacancies almost every position. Another area where we are considerably short, as you can see, is the patient care, our nursing. So if anybody's got friends or family or yourself in the nursing field that are looking for a job, we'll get to that specifically. You know, it pays pretty well, it pays pretty good with the benefits. Here is the link, and I will share this in the chat portion once I get out of the screen view. So if anybody's looking for it, and this is the link that it's going to take you to. You can type in what type of job you're looking for, or what field, where you're at, and what type of radius you would be interested in looking for jobs, and do a search. Also, in the middle right, if you got questions regarding benefits or whatnot, there's a lot of that laid out there. You know, and ultimately, I can speak for every institution. If you are looking for a job, you could almost call every institution and speak to the HR, human resource director, and they can give you a lot of that information or put you in touch with the correct people as well. So if you go to that site, you're going to need to create an account. Pretty simple. Put your name and your info and your email. You can search by keyword or title, as I mentioned. You will need a resume, and every application is evaluated by subject matter experts in that area of the field that you're looking to get into. As I mentioned, with all those, 250 jobs, different jobs, there's likely a job for everyone. Background checks and fingerprinting are hired, and we do not discriminate on a criminal record unless it has a direct nexus to the job duties. There's certain areas that certain persons cannot do with their background, and that, if they have a restriction from firearms deemed to them by the court, you can't put them in a correction officer role, because one of the roles of the correction officer is to maintain firearms. So there's only a few of those positions. So reality is there is a lot of positions for everybody. We do our best to hire a diverse and personnel, but I will admit, in certain areas, the institution, and we spoke on this earlier, and we can get into it a little bit later, and Ms. Fox, maybe I don't have a diverse population in my county or surrounding county, really. And that affects our relationship at times with the persons in our care, the men in our care. We don't have that. So we try to pull that in and deal with that, or pull that in and recruit that, but it doesn't always work. Here's just some more of the artwork, I guess. Speaking specifically on nursing and nursing staff, the starting pay is over $33 an hour. Depending on your experience, could go up to almost 38, and there is additional add-on for night shifts and weekend shifts as well. So if anybody knows anybody in the nursing profession that's looking for a career, we certainly would be willing to meet with them. Again, here's that link. With that said, there's 21 adult and juvenile institutions that you consider a prison. With that, additionally, we have 16 correctional centers. Those are your minimum community work release centers typically, and they are scattered throughout the state, some in the more urban areas, quite a few in the rural areas, and those are the men and women that actually go out into the community and work. They typically are getting nearer their release date, and it offers them an opportunity to gain some more life skills, adjust to a little bit more freedom, spend some time out of the institution, make considerably more money than they would working a role or a position in the institution, and hopefully sets them up for a release where they can be successful, rather than, say somebody that releases from restrictive housing out of a maximum institution, and it happens every week. But typically, those persons are going to have a significantly more difficult time adjusting to their role on the outside. And shockingly, we have 170 probation and parole offices through the state. Almost every county will have at least one. Obviously, the more population dense areas will have considerably more. And what a lot of people don't realize is typically a person in our care is going to be released to the county that they were charged in. So that's not always where they live. And sometimes that makes things difficult as well. Now they can petition and request a transfer of their supervision, but that's not always come through. So if somebody were traveling, and this is where we see a lot of releases to areas on this side of the state, if they were traveling from, say, Madison, Milwaukee up to the Twin Cities, stopped off and there was an issue and they were arrested and charged in this county, they are going to release to this county, which makes things difficult at times because they might be 2 or 3 hours from their family, 2 or 3 hours from housing, 2 or 3 hours from a community or culture that they're more used to. Correction officer is our largest starting role. That is our security, as I said, is almost half of our force. And right now the correction officer wage is $19.03. With a correction officer, you're going to work weekends, holidays, and it's a 24-hour facility. So the bonus of that is if you meet a few requirements, as in starting young enough, you can retire at as early as 51. So a little bit more relating to starting at that 1903. Schedule increases over the first couple of years will take you up to almost $22 an hour. And your first year, you get 26 paid days off. A little bit of the progression related to the correctional ranks or the security ranks is you're typically going to start as an officer. You can promote to a sergeant, and that will be the lead worker for the sergeant, for the officers. Typically, each area of the institution or housing unit will have at least one sergeant that oversees the functions of the officer. The sergeants report to the lieutenants, and lieutenants report to the captain. Once you move from the captain to the security director rank, a few things start to change. They leave what's considered the protected status, and their retirement starts getting adjusted the other way. And you can move to the security director. The security director oversees all security functions of the institution. The security director reports to somebody like myself, the deputy warden. So not only does the deputy warden oversee the security director and the functions, the deputy warden typically oversees the programming, education, and the housing side of things. So it's a little bit of a dual role with security, obviously, and overseeing security. But our primary focus is a lot of the education and programming, the work release, their vocational skills and studies related to that. And then who bosses me around is our warden. That each institution is going to have one. Each institution is only going to have one deputy warden, one security director as well. But I ultimately report to my warden. So we can speak on this, and if anybody's got any questions related to the vacancies, why are the vacancies so high? The demand for jobs right now is high. I don't think anybody listening or involved in this can drive down the road and not see now hiring signs everywhere. With that, the supply of workers is low. And where we at times struggle is we can fall behind in our wages because unlike a private entity, if I own a business on the street and I can't get employees, my only real option is to change something, and that's either the wage or benefits or both. but it takes legislative action to change the starting wages and benefits relating to career or state employees. So as we all know, state employment or state and federal government doesn't move the fastest, and it takes a long time. So that is an area where at times we can go ahead, but then after a couple of years we can fall back behind. So it's definitely an area that we're all aware of. We see these signs, we see the current signs changing all around us, or the starting wages for different things are higher. But as it says below, I hope that people that are coming into the Department of Corrections, whether it's in prison or other aspects of it, they realize this is a career. This isn't a job. There's other areas where you maybe can make a few dollars more an hour, but you're not going to retire at 51 years old. You're going to work to your mid 60s. You're not going to have the, 4 or 5 weeks vacation after a couple of years of working. You're not going to have the sick leave benefits. But, for a lot of the younger generation, they don't necessarily think that far ahead. They're thinking about, I need the extra $1.50, $2 an hour right now because I got a child on the way, or I got a wedding to pay for, I got to pay off my school debt. So that is some of our struggles in relation to our vacancies. We do a lot. We reach out to the colleges. We have interns in here. We have nursing interns, social work interns, education interns, psychology interns at any given time. And that really is our best recruitment. If we can get them in here and realize that this is a pretty good job, they can meet their fellow staff members, they realize they can make a difference in the lives of the persons in our care, that we typically have a very good success rate of retaining those persons. And that's the end of that quick slide. At any time, if anybody's got any questions, we certainly can jump in. And I know Miss Barber's got a few that will lead us and hopefully open up discussion amongst you all. So with that said, I'm going to stop screen sharing and open it up to everybody.
Wonderful. Thank you for the presentation. So I will have a few questions, but before I do that, does anybody else have any that you want to shoot out before I jump in? Kelsey or Courtney, any questions? Go ahead.
Yeah, I had like a very general question. Earlier you had talked about, and you may not know the answer to this, and this can be either to you, Mr. Kevin, or Miss Fox there. You had said that typically when somebody gets arrested, they're released back to the county in which they were arrested in. So why is that? I'm just kind of curious. Seems kind of counterproductive.
Yeah, I wish I had a really good answer for you, other than that's what the law states. It's not a decision that neither Ms. Fox or I get to make. It's actually administrative code, which is a state statute. Truthfully, it's probably pretty antiquated. It probably goes way back to 50 or 60 years ago, when those decisions were being made. I don't have a really good answer, and I'm not going to make one up or make excuses. And it might be a caseload and a workload issue as well. The majority of the persons in my care are from the Southeast Wisconsin. If we said you all got to go back there, it's a housing unit issue there. That's a living issue that might be even more difficult for Ms. Barber to accomplish. So that might be some intrinsic tag-ons or add-ons to that, but realistically, I think just the statute and that rule came in place many years ago when it wasn't as big of an issue as it is now.
Thanks.
Thank you. Good question. Good question. I have a question. So with the numbers being so low with the staff, meaning that, there's a lot of vacancies, has there been any discussion as far as having those in your care take some of those positions at a better wage other than the 12 cents an hour? And the reason I say that is because, you had mentioned that there's sometimes people that, spend a lengthy sentence and then end up getting out with maybe $50, or in a county they're not even from, or they have trouble starting off. So has there been any discussion recently, since these numbers have changed and skewed so much, about possibly paying a little better wage for those that are already within the facilities, who possibly may have all the qualifications for that position?
Realistically, no, there hasn't. We're always looking at, ways that the institution can run more efficiently and, I'd sometimes just make it through the day or the week. But I believe that again would take a legislative change. The wages are set through statute, which is administrative code, that is going to say what we can pay a person in our care for doing certain duties at a certain level. We've struggled to get persons in our care to work. We cannot get them to work, and some of it could be the pay. There's no doubt about it. But I've had them tell me that I just got $1,200 stimulus money, and if I do the math, that's 3 years of work. So I'm not working for the next 3 years. I'm retired. So sometimes rather than them building on their release accounts with that money, they will just drain on that. And so it sets them up and makes it more difficult for you when you got to find them housing when you think, boy, if they would have had that $1,200 plus 300 or 400 they may have saved over the last handful of years, it at least gets them their first and last month in security deposit. You can get them into a place and get them a job. So we have struggled in the prison to keep them working as well. We are consistently trying to make that a reality, and the stimulus money definitely affected that. Before the stimulus money, we didn't have any issues filling jobs. There's only, I'd say, out of our 1,000 persons here, we have about 220 jobs, and when that stimulus money hit, we probably went to about 100 that were working for those jobs.
Wow. Yeah. I know on a personal note, I heard from a gentleman that was working at Oak Hill. So they have the farming and everything happening over there. And, one of the jobs that he picked up was working with the cows and the things like that. And he said, the hard part about it is for 12 cents an hour, I'm getting smacked in the face with a tail full of, and if I quit, I'm going to SAG. And so it's like, it's one thing to say, oh, so what are you going to do? Well, I'm going to keep working because I don't want to go to SAG. But it's another thing if some of them know what kind of jobs are available to them and they already know, hey, that's really not up my alley. And I don't want to get punished if I try it and then don't like it. So maybe there's kind of a disconnect of some of the positions that are available. But Danetta, you had your hand up. Did you want to jump in?
Yeah, what I'd like to say to that, yes, financially, it would be good if we can pay those incarcerated persons more money, right, to get them prepared. But what I used to tell them, I was a work release coordinator as well, is look at the skills you're gaining. It's a lot of people coming in have never worked before, or they don't have the structure and how to get up, how to create a resume, how to go through an interview, how to just structure your life around working, and what does that mean, and how do you keep the job once you get the job. So there's certain skills that they can learn that can be useful when they do go out there and get the real jobs. And so I like to, or used to say, look at this aspect of it. You're not making the money you want to make, but those other skills that you need and that you're going to have experience that you can put on your resume, that's what you need to get out there and get started. So it's a two-way street too,
Absolutely. That's a really great point. And then to add on to that, are you finding that some of those individuals that you're offering them positions, has anyone expressed any concerns with working, say, laundry or kitchen, given the pandemic? And the fact that at that point, then there's that risk of, I can't take that job because you're really getting put in the middle of things. Have you heard anything else about that with the jobs and the workers?
No, realistically, I have not heard that as an excuse. Sadly, I don't feel that most of the persons in our care take the COVID situation serious. I'm looking at my cameras now. Every person is supposed to be wearing a mask, and I'm looking at about 60 persons, and I don't see anybody wearing it. I think, like in the public, they feel like it's been a year now, it's run its course, but no. And as far as, like our actual employee staffing, we truthfully, maybe wrongfully thought that COVID was going to be a good thing for our recruitment efforts, because the restaurants closed down, the retail stores closed down, the hotels were laying people off. We were not, obviously. We didn't get to, and we didn't see the increase. And I think there's some other reasons related to the unemployment add-on that hurt our recruitment efforts with that, that additional money that went out wasn't the incentive to come to work where it would have been, but not necessarily internally. I mean, obviously there's some that take it very serious and they have, but I don't think that's affected our ability to hire those positions near as much as that the stimulus money that came in for them. When you're making 27 cents an hour, that $1,200 is a lot of hours to work to make up for that.
Absolutely. And for the positions that you have that are open, and one of them we had talked about previously, but was like the social workers and the things like that that actually connect those in your care to reentry and coming home. And with that being such a low population right now of how many that you have and how many that you need, I should say, that those positions are just kind of sitting there. Do you have anyone stepping into that role as a temporary, just to make sure people don't miss out on their opportunity to come home, or miss out on being the ability to send paperwork or follow with the outside world, things like that? Do you have someone else that steps in to take that, or is it is the instruction just kind of like, well, we only have so many and you'll just have to wait your turn? Or how are you being affected by that portion?
So some of the duties of the social worker can only be done by a social worker because of the classification and their licensing, right? They are federally and state licensed as a social worker. So there's certain things that other people can't. But sadly, it just creates an increased workload. Nobody hasn't got to go home because of a social worker shortage. We can't do that. Nobody, their release plan is not done. Where we do run into issues is maybe some of that stuff that doesn't get the attention that they would have had we had a full caseload, or had they not had twice as much of a caseload than they should have. So I don't want to say the quality is not necessarily their fault, because the quantity is doubled. They have to get through it. And, we're all human. And at some point when you're working that additional harder, that much harder for realistically no additional pay, things happen. And whether that be on purpose or even on accident, but certain areas, certainly other people step in and help, but inherently there's a lot of things that they do that they can only do because of their licensing.
Yeah, and I guess another question to throw out there, as long as we have some time too, is the stress levels of those that are directly in contact with those in your care. And having to do maybe extended hours or stay late, or so and so didn't show up. So now very much like a nurse's schedule would be at that point. What kinds of things do you have in place and for them so that their stress level doesn't carry over to the persons in your care?
Well, realistically, we need a certain amount of staff here at any given day to run. We're mandated how many security staff have to be here, how many other staff, we have to have food service staff because they have to put out the meal. And what the issue with that in institutions that are short, and thankfully Jackson is not one of them, we send our staff to other institutions to assist because of their shortages. But it does 100% create an issue with staff. How many 16-hour days could you do in a row before you break down? How many 16-hour days do you do in a row before you physically and or mentally break down? And you still have to do it, and you have to come into work, and you're held to a standard that at times is impossible to uphold when you are emotionally broken from maybe there's issues at home, you haven't seen your kids, you've missed the third or fourth baseball game of the season in a row because you are here. And then it's an issue, and it's us as leaders and our supervisors that we have to recognize that and say, hey, Garceau doesn't look good. He normally comes in this X, Y, and Z, and he has been working a lot of hours that he does not want to work. What are we going to do, or how can we reach out to that person? But ultimately, we still have to have as many people as we can here. So, it's important that they understand that they need to have time away, and to separate work from their home life as best as they can, use their vacation days. I tell people it's great to make friends at work, and it's great to do things with friends from work, outside of work, but it's even better to do things with friends that have nothing to do with it, or you didn't ever leave work. Because what do we all talk about when we're surrounded by people we work with? Work. And that's not the decompression we need. And Ms. Fox can probably speak on that coming up to the uniform ranks as well. There's a minimum standard, and it puts them in a bad spot. You know, I was assisting at Columbia, and there was staff there who voluntarily were working 90 to 100 hours a week, voluntarily. And some people can do it, right? You know, some people can do it because they wanted the money, they wanted to pay off their car, to pay off their home, and it affects their retirement. The more they make, the more they retire with. But there's also a huge handful of people that are doing 60 to 72 hours a week that only want 40. They either physically or mentally can't do it, or they have home, you know, maybe they're a single parent and they're struggling to find childcare. And sadly, you know, there's nothing we can do about that. We have to have you here. So maybe
I would imagine that's also got to be a little difficult on those in your care, because then they, you know, there's no choice, and they're constantly, that's, you know, that's who they're in contact with. So they can't leave to go be with peers who aren't doing what they're doing. All their peers are all doing time, you know, and then you're only interacting, the only new faces you have are those staff who are also doing way too many hours. And, you know, it's just got to be a kind of difficult all around. So my question then too with that is, what do you do with the feedback that comes in from those that are actually incarcerated, those in your care? How do their voices chime in on something like this to show that you're considering what they're going through when everyone around them is just a really difficult situation and overstressed?
I just wanted to chime in before you get to that. Like I said, I've been retired now for 5 years, so I can't say what's happening now or in the last 5 years. But I remember those days when I had to work those mandatory overtimes, and I had a 2-year-old at the time. And you're exhausted, and you just don't want to do it anymore. And I think, and I hope that, again, we're moving in that direction where we can recognize that there comes a time when you are working too many hours and you're not safe to work there. You're more of a hindrance now than you are an asset. And so looking at that, saying, what can we do to relieve our staff and give them a breather, to be able to be their best at work so that they can give their best to those incarcerated, right? I don't know what's happening then, but back then there was no relief. You just did it. You just powered through and waited till you got your seniority, and hopefully you can get around it that way. But yeah, I'm hoping that things are looking a little bit differently these days. And Kevin, I guess you can speak to that.
Yeah, there's certainly been, you know, some changes with that, and a lot of institutions will, you know, shut areas down to alleviate the amount of staff needed. But that has a ripple effect. You know, how many days in a row can I shut recreation down and not give it to the persons in our care before that creates an issue? You know, also, you know, the things that I expect my supervisors to do is to say, hey, you know, Fox has been getting slammed lately. You know, that housing unit is hot. You know, it's the middle of summer and there's no air conditioning, or they're up in a tower and it's hot. Let's put them out on the rec so they can move around and get some fresh air and try, you know, have a different sense of their vigilance changes. You know, they don't have somebody right behind them. They're not, you know, doing, you know, showers in July or August, where, you know, escorting men to and from the shower where the steam and the humidity's through the roof and it just zaps them. So there's been a lot in the last few years, a lot more flexibility with some of that. And thankfully, Jackson's been very fortunate. We don't typically have to shut areas down, and we're able to offer staff to assist at other institutions. But that's asking a lot of our staff. You know, it's an hour, 2-hour drive, and of course it's compensated, and we pay for their mileage and their time. But, you know, they might go there for a few days and realize, you know, I'm, you know, even for an 8-hour shift, I'm on the road, I'm gone for 12 hours, you know. So there's a lot more flexibility than there used to be, but sadly, some institutions are so short, the seniority doesn't matter. You know, people with 20, 25 years are working ridiculous amount of hours because it's the bare minimum on the security side.
And going back to the original question too, how do the inmates voices come into play when it comes to those things? Because one thing that you have mentioned was like the heat and the steam and air conditioning. So I know at several facilities that were maybe closing down one section or one hall and then they're moved, or, and there's not enough people who are able to walk them to showers, where in your point of view, it's, we're not going to do all those showers so much because the steam is very hot. And then on the other flip side, in their point of view, is it's, hey, it's been every 3 days I don't get a shower. So how is that communication, other than the blast email? How are their voices being heard to kind of work within this hiring process? Do you take what their needs are into consideration when you are putting out openings for those positions and say, hey, we're really hurting over here, let's post for this? Or where do they come in on the say of what's going on in their house?
So, I mean, it's not necessarily that they typically have a say, but we kind of have an idea where the climate's at and where some our concerns are at. Like we're having issues on this one housing unit because they've had fill-in social workers for 6 months. We haven't been able to fill that. So then I or the warden will say, this is an area that needs to be addressed. The next social worker that we hire, if we can hire one, will go to this area because that's where the need is. In a lot of it's like right now, it's our intake unit. They're just coming into the institution, so they don't have visitors yet. They don't have anything set up. So that social worker is a vital role in getting their programming started, their visiting list, and getting them reacclimated and kind of learning prison. Learning what to expect, and here's what you're going to expect. So that is an area that we wouldn't, and that came open, and I had to tell another social worker, I'm like, I need, I met with all the social workers, says, I need a volunteer to go there, or I'm going to have to designate somebody to go there because this area cannot be short.
Right.
So it's not necessarily their direct feedback, but in general, the complaints that we get, and truthfully, when there starts to be a climate issue, we start seeing increases in conduct reports, because the tensions are rising. And it's not necessarily even conduct reports from, a staff initiated, but we'll see arguments, disruptions, and fights start to escalate because of the frustrations for a variety of reasons. And that could be a staffing or the shutting down of areas.
Right. You can see when the tensions are arising and what's going on. So then in preparation for bringing in new staff, do you have, especially with the pandemic, has anything changed now that's new, training for the people that are just being hired to understand diversity and inclusion, and maybe just mental health in general, of how they are expected to be able to communicate with a person in your care instead of a number or inmate?
Yeah. So, and Donata can speak on this as well, was, all staff get a level of training. Correction officers go to a 7-week course. They have 4 weeks of OJT when they complete. Then they have, an assigned field training officer that they report to that meets with them, at least at Jackson, they meet with them weekly. They kind of have a checklist of how they're progressing through the system. And some of it is their interactions, their role modeling, their mentorship. It's not just the lock them up, turn the key type stuff. That's, restraints and stuff is part of it because that's safety for everybody, but all that. But even the social workers now, and it has changed since Ms. Fox is left, have, field training officers and mentors. So they're like, hey, I'm struggling with this. And they meet and they progress together rather than, all right, well, here's the handbook, there's your office. And that line of 100 inmates or persons in our care is waiting on their visiting list and let me know when it's done. So there's considerably more training on the front end than there used to be. And some of it is, basic security, their self-defense and how to recognize danger signals. And some of it's their treatment, and some of it is their interactions.
Is there a specific diversity and an inclusion for, especially in your area where you don't really have that in that community, so you don't really have it in your staff? Is there a specific course or any amount of training that helps deal with the population being not like them?
Absolutely. Each year, I'm 99% sure each year, each staff person has to go through some level of diversity inclusion training. And sometimes it's online, sometimes it's in person. Depending on their job duties, they may have more. And supervisory even has more of that to recognize some issues where they have to go to the point where to be a supervisor on the promotional interview, there will always be a diversity, harassment, inclusion type question to show that they know. So there's even a more onus on that area as a supervisor level.
And Ms. Fox, did you actually have some of that?
A little. I think we could do more in that area. And like I said, I'm sure things have changed since then, but that was one of my concerns back then too, was, and we talked about it at the last panel, is that when you have those two different cultures and age ranges, so you got an 18-year-old, like I said, from New Lisbon, supervising a 40-year-old, someone from the metropolitan area or urban areas, with all this life experience, that's a hard mix, and to make that connection and to be able to supervise and connect with that person on a different level. I think some training does need to happen and continually happen, not just once a year, but I think ongoing. That should be something that we require, just like we, recertify with guns and weapons and things of that nature. I think people should, diversity, trauma and care, informed care, all of that should be on a kind of a regular schedule, I think, with all staff working with persons incarcerated.
Yeah, I want to follow up. I actually have a follow-up question for you, Ms. Fox, about that. So as your time as a captain, how did you deal with, or did you ever have to deal with, like, I'm just going to say bad apples, like employees who were just continuously, people in your care constantly just kind of complaining about them and saying that they're doing X, Y, Z. So like, especially given today's climate with, brutality, police brutality and everything like that, like, how did you deal with that, or how did you handle that situation?
Absolutely. I had a few instances in my career of that, and I have always been a person to call it out. I've never been one to shy away from it. A person is a person is a person, right? We're all humans. We all make mistakes. But especially the way I looked at it was, you're in a position where you're supervising these folks and we're supposed to be role models, right? And teaching good behavior. But if you're not doing that and your integrity is not there as it should be as a professional, it's up to me to correct that, because now you're jeopardizing the safety of everybody else, right? And so I did address it. It was difficult, but yeah, it was dealt with. And whether it's, again, investigation, retraining, and if retraining didn't work, there was discipline that happened, things of that nature. Were people that maybe were moved out of that particular position or situation and moved in another area where they couldn't do the harm that was being done, things of that nature. But it's also difficult when you have laws and processes and administration, there's only so much that you can do. And you do the best that you can with what you have, but no, it was addressed.
Okay. And then as a follow-up, I know we were talking about just now with the labor shortages, and I don't know how it was back then, but how willing were you and the institution willing to hire like these bad apples, because you guys were just so desperate for people? Because, we kind of often hear about that in the news, about how these cops go from one department to another, or, these correctional officers go from one, jail to another. And, they always say, oh, it's because of the shortages and we just need people. So like, I guess, how willing were you guys to kind of hire, I'm just going to say bad apples?
Sure.
Given the shortage, how, were y'all willing to overlook bad behavior, things like that?
Kevin, I'll let you go first and then I'll respond.
For sure.
Yeah.
Reality is there's a certain amount of behavior that's non-recoverable. There's certain things that they've done that we're not that short. I hate to say it, and because we are such a large entity, if I'm under investigation for screwing up, I just can't go to Oak Hill and it's all gone. Where maybe people in different job professions can quick move to a different department because it's not the same jurisdiction. It's all one big umbrella. Or if I was under investigation and I quit, and 3-4 months later I applied across the state, that's all still there. That information is still there. And that may be where some of these issues with, outside law enforcement, because you're dealing with small pockets, and as they're moving around, that information may not be shared, where that's a little bit, different in something of 10,000 employees. It doesn't go away. Matter of fact, if somebody resigns while they're under investigation, which happens all the time because it's a difference in benefits from termination to resignation, my letter that I give them and I sign as the warden or deputy warden says, I accept your resignation in the process of a disciplinary action. and there's even a blurb that says, if you were to reapply or be rehired, this action will continue. So it doesn't go away just because they quit. So some of that, we can purge some of those bad apples and protect ourselves. But with that, people make mistakes, and the point of the discipline is to change the behavior. And we all make mistakes. It's how we handle those mistakes, so whether we take the discipline given to us, we take the corrective action discipline to us, we're open to the change, really goes a long way. Just like we understand that the persons in our care have made mistakes, and we're willing, we want to see them succeed and give it a second chance. We have to do that for our staff too. But there's no doubt that we don't really get to have bad days. Like law enforcement we can't blame that. I mean, we're going to have bad days. We can't use that as an excuse. It may come into play relating to the level of discipline. Ms. Fox has been working 5 straight 16-hour days against her will. She was short, and that will take into play, but it doesn't excuse it. So Ms. Fox can speak on that a little bit as her role too in the past.
And as what do I want to say? When you're hiring and you have that initial hire, people always are going to tell you what you want to hear and give you the good words in the interview, right? It's not until after they're hired and they pass that probation that you kind of see the different sides of people. For me, it's always been, and everywhere I've gone to, people will tell you about the bad people, right? Look out for this one, or this officer's like this, or this person. And my thing is, let me find out for myself. I'll always figure out what the right thing to do is. But my thing is modeling the right behavior. So if I'm expecting this of my staff and of my officers, I have to model what I want them to do. So that's number one. And so I even hold myself accountable. If I made a mistake or did something wrong, and I can own that and say, you know what, this was my mistake, learn from it, let's move on. But you correct that. But a lot of times I think too, and I mentioned this before, I think sometimes we hire staff that don't have enough experience and don't have that age on them and don't have enough background to be able to do the job. So in a way that it should be done, that's going to benefit everybody. I think we do have some bad apples, but again, that's on us then to train, to model, to continue to interact with them to a point to get them where they're safe and where they're productive. And if not, then it's on us again to figure out another plan for that person.
Mhm. That's so true. And I just, we're coming up on the end of our time here. So I guess I just want to thank both of you for all of the information that you shared, and both of the attendees as well. And to just keep in mind that in every bunch where there's a bad apple, there's also a bad orange, and what I say about that, what I mean with that is, like, when we're putting a lot of emphasis on the employees and the staff of the DOC and who you have to hire and who you're bringing in, you may have a bad apple and you may have several good ones. And you really want to make sure you emphasize and model against those, along with the several good ones. And then just as a reminder, on the flip side, same thing goes true for those people in our care. There may be some that actually did earn the correction portion of their sentence. Ultimately, in this state, as we all know, there's several that are in there not because of necessarily a bad choice or a bad apple, but because their bunch was bad. And they're also, expecting to have that quality care because they're quality people and they want to come home and do it the right way. So thank you so much for talking about your staffing, and hopefully you'll consider that too as you move forward. And Danetta, thank you so much for coming and speaking about today and also how it's affected you from before. And the attendees, thank you so much for attending, and we're not done with the day yet. So we're going to just log off here and go back to your main link, and then we'll continue from that point. And again, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
A pleasure.
It's great, very informative.
Have a great day, everybody. Enjoy the rest of the conference.
You too. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.